Good day, RoboCon. Dave Martin here. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm joining you from Salt Lake City, Utah, and excited to be part of the RoboCon conference. I want to speak to you guys today about my success story and going from no experience with the robot framework to having a very complex automated test, regression test, automated in just 2 weeks' time. So let me explain a little bit about that automated test. The application, the test that I needed to automate was a 3-week-long manual regression test that involved validation of many different data points, and typically could only be run once or twice in a dev cycle or in a release cycle because of how much time it took. And I automated that test in 2 weeks. You're right, that's right. The test that took 3 weeks to run manually, I automated it in less time than it took to run once manually. And not only that, the framework was, the application under test was written in EXTJS, which added a whole nother layer of complexity. Because those of you who know EXTJS applications, they're very, very difficult to automate. So a little about me. I have 4 kids. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. This picture was taken in the Virgin Islands. I spent 2 years living in the Virgin Islands with my family. Had a job there. It was great. Great while it lasted. That deck we're standing on was blown away along with most of my house in Hurricane Irma. So my kids are all adopted, so I love adoption. I've been doing QA for about 25 years and started just a couple of years ago using Robot, and I absolutely love it. Robot Framework is my favorite automation tool that I've ever used, and I've used a lot. So let's talk a little bit about the formula for success and being able to go from 0 to hero in 2 weeks. We'll talk about the design, the different elements of the design that allowed me to be successful, the result, and the driving adoption. So how we got adoption of the framework after that 2 weeks, being able to take it further. So learning robot framework, you can see here from the learning pyramid that reading doesn't drive retention. And I could have just gone and read the robot documentation, but I decided to buy a course online. I bought a course on Udemy with my own money, and the course was taught by Brian Lamb. And the audio, visual, the demonstration nature of that course really, really helped drive that learning and that retention. I focused all of my practicing on the application under test rather than the application that was being used in the learning course, which was Amazon.com. I focused all of my learning on the application, and that just really helped drive the cement the learning that I was doing. And then I had a coworker that started at the same time as me. I would kind of share things with him and show him how to do different things that I was learning. And we just kind of bounced ideas off of each other. And that was kind of the magic sauce is, the online course plus practicing on the application, teaching others really helps. So I agree with the learning pyramid, if you will. It was a great way of learning the tool. And all that was just a few days, just spanned a few days. I was, from the very start of taking this course, I was implementing the things I was learning with every single chapter or lesson in the course. So the very first thing anybody automates when they're automating an application is probably the login screen. So I started there. And there was kind of a couple of workflows that are main workflows in our application that are really central to being able to do anything else. So one of those is obviously the sign-in process, and then we have kind of a creation and onboarding process. And I automated those processes. Maybe evolved maybe 10 different screens, bunch of different inputs, but check boxes, buttons, drop-down lists, you name it. Um, and I started with that. So within the very first week of learning the tool, I have this core workflow automated. And I shared with a few people, hey, I've got this automated. That's kind of cool. Let me show you. And our PSR test engineer came up to me and says, hey, I need 500 customers created, or items created for PSR testing. Can your automation handle that? And I'm like, sure. So within the first week, I'm now running the same workflow that I've just automated 500 different times. And so I wrote a batch script to kind of put it together. And I've since learned that a template test would have been the right way to do that. But then I wrote a batch script to call the robot command 500 times with different variable inputs, and it ran flawlessly. So that was the first real big win. And it was important to establish that win because that just drove enthusiasm and excitement going forward and confidence. So the next step was the organization. This was key in how I organized my files. And the organizational principles I focused on were organizing for expansion, being able to, if somebody down the road wanted to leverage this, this framework for their automation, they could. And so I created kind of a root level. At the root of my repo, I created product folders. There was really only one product folder at the time. That was my product that I was automating. But I hoped that there might be more in the future, so I designed it that way. Also, the one of my organizational principles was to be able to have a place for common artifacts, common resources, common keywords, things that are application agnostic. So that also lives at the root in a folder called common. And then the other organizational principle was for ease of locating keywords. So you can see here on the, using the Lego analogy, with keywords being these individual Legos, without a good organizational strategy, they're going to be really hard to find and locate the keyword that you need, unless you create it yourself and you know where it is. But I didn't want people to have to go reinvent the wheel. If they want to use this framework, they should be able to know where things are in an intuitive way. So that kind of drove the organizational principles. You can see here in general how I structured things on the left. And then each of the folders mirrored that same hierarchy. Each of the product folders and the common folder. A folder for libraries, a folder for resources, pages organized by features or different areas of the application. An area for tests within there, for test data, maybe for test suites, for unit tests. I found unit testing certain things to be important, certain keywords, high use or common keywords especially. So that's the organization. Very important. I can't overstate how much that helped and still does today. Leveraging design patterns. Here's an example of what I would call a page object. So page object design. I use the term design pattern somewhat loosely because they're usually used in an object-oriented world, whereas this is more of a keyword-driven syntax. But the principles still apply. So the page object pattern, I create resource files that contain the keywords necessary for interacting with the different elements of that particular page. In this case, the sign-in page. The factory pattern, this is where you have kind of private or internal objects and then public or external objects. So I have this concept of public keywords or private keywords. There really is no difference. A keyword is a keyword is a keyword. They're all the same. But the public keywords are designed to be consumed outside of the page object by tests directly. Whereas the private keywords are more designed to be used by public keywords within the resource file. So in this case, sign in is leveraging input username, input password, click sign in button. But those individual keywords are there in case maybe I wanted a workflow where I want to input password before username, right? It's kind of an alternate workflow, if you will, or error scenarios, right? Where maybe I don't want to just go straight click the sign in button, but I want to click on a forgot password link or something, right? So that's why I have these layers here, and it really helps for maintainability and reusability. The Yagni principle, you aren't going to need it. So I don't go to a page in the application and say, I'm going to create every keyword I need for anything I might ever want to do on this page. I create keywords when I need them and only when I need them, not before. So a couple of important design principles that I try to focus on. And this is a good example that it kind of illustrates both the page object design and the factory pattern. And really the Yagni principle. I don't have a keyword here for clicking the forgot password link or something because I don't have a test that I need it for right now. But I'm sure there will be one day. In this case, this is a completely arbitrary example. This is not related to my application, but right now I'm creating keywords for signing in and as a means to an end, not for testing the sign-in page. Creating breadth before depth. This is an important element of my design. I'm going to share with you a success story in just a minute, but I want to kind of explain this breadth before depth. The test that I was trying to automate, or that I was automating, involved repeating the same steps. And there was a bunch of steps involved, but repeating those same steps hundreds of times with just small tweaks, clicking a different link or opening up a different screen and drilling through. But the same end-to-end workflow was the same. It was just small differences that I would use arguments to drive. So I automated one scenario, and it took most of that 2 weeks to do one scenario, end to end. It maybe accounted for maybe 20 tests. That, a bunch of different screens verifying different data points. Once I had that end-to-end test down, I added all the others in a matter of hours, not days, hours. And so I went from maybe 20 tests to 1,200 tests very, very quickly because of this breadth before depth design. So here's a quick success story. My boss comes up to me on a Friday at 4:45, and this really happened. Hey, Dave, do you have automation for this workflow? Nope, not yet, but it's on my list of things to do. I had all the pieces. I didn't tell him that. I had all the pieces. I just had to put them together for that particular scenario. It's like, can you bump it up on your priority list? Management's asking about it. Sure thing. 5 minutes later, hey, boss, it's done. It's automated. It's like, what? Really? But I had all the pieces. I had all the building blocks. It was just a matter of putting them together. But it was that breadth before depth design that really allowed for that quick turnaround. A couple of useful keywords that just wanted to share. Every page object in my application, or nearly every page object, resource file, has these two keywords: navigate to and verify as loaded. Navigate to knows how to get to the page, and how to navigate to the page, and verify is loaded verifies that the page is loaded by checking for certain page elements. The reason those two are separate is because I might land on a page in a different way than navigating to it. Maybe I close another page and I end up on a page. And so I might want to verify that page is loaded, but not navigate to it. So they're two different things, but this design really has made maintenance really nice. We happened to do a pretty major change to the application under test, where we changed the whole menu style navigation, and it broke the automation completely. It took me about 2 hours to fix the automation, probably 100 pages. But all I had to do was go to that navigate to keyword and update that, and that was it. For every keyword, I updated that key. For every page object, I updated the navigate to keyword, and a couple hours later, the automation's fixed. Major change in the application under test, super easy to maintain, or to, with this design, was able to roll with that change. So the end result, 15-day manual test. Jokingly, the 5 days recovering from carpal tunnel, not really, but man, it was a painful test. In 10 days, I designed the automation, and that automation took 5 hours to run. So a test that we could really only afford to run once or twice per release, we can now run with every build if we want. And I do, because of the short execution time. And I've expanded on that now. It takes longer to run now because it does a whole bunch more, because the building blocks are in place. So now, let me add this in, let me add this, and let me add that in. And we've been really able to expand it quite a bit. So resulted in over 1,200 tests, each with about 8 different data validation points. But so I could multiply that 1,200 by 8 to get a true number of validation points, but I'm not interested in artificially exploding the automation numbers. So that's the design, that's the result. Here's what I did next to kind of really drive the adoption: spreading the word, putting on my salesman hat. I had demo meetings with anybody and everybody I could think of to showcase the automation. The word got out quickly, but there was some responsibility on my part to get the word out. And so don't be afraid to toot your horn and to really spread the word. Giving it a name, personifying it. We had a naming contest. I involved the team members, said, hey, best name. Person who comes up with the best name gets a candy bar. So we had this, this was my baby. Had to give it a name. Called it, the winning name was Mr. Roboto, or just Roboto for short, right? Cue the Styx music. But no, that's what we affectionately call it, and it's now just referred to Roboto internally. Next step was kind of building the community. So I leveraged existing tools. We had a Slack channel or a Google Chat channel or room or whatever, and I created a room in there for the robot framework community that I was trying to build. I called it robot.framework. Then I started creating a room for each of the different applications that were starting to use the tool. And then started a bi-weekly meeting that we also had a naming contest for. The winning name was meeting.robot. And we have that every 2 weeks. We demo, we showcase different wins that we've had, talk about different styling things, or if I'm going to roll out a new process, that's a great meeting to do it in. So building the community really helped drive adoption. But again, this was a concerted effort. I think what really drove adoption over the edge was integrating with the existing tools. So integrating with Git, our source code, our corporate source code management system, and or GitHub in this case, but Jenkins, leveraging our CI/CD tooling to execute the tests, Selenium Grid, our test management solution, Tricetis Q-Test. So these are all being able to integrate with all these tools really drove adoption further. And shifting my design thinking. So I started with this bottom-up approach. A bottom-up approach to design. That's where I started with the test, then I refactored to break out the keywords, and then I might refactor again to break out common keywords. Where now I've shifted to a top-down where I think I have a problem. What common keywords am I going to need? What application-specific keywords am I going to need? Which resources files am I going to have to create? Or which keywords already exist? And then I use those to build my test. Both design approaches are completely valid. I just found early on a bottom-up design was a little easier for me to get my head around for Robot Framework. And now that I know the tool well, the top-down approach is working for me. I still use a bottom-up approach for certain problems. But there's nothing wrong with either approach. I just kind of wanted to highlight the shift that took place in my thinking. Documenting. So from the very start, I was documenting. The setup steps was the very first thing, the setup instructions. From day one, as I was learning with the online course I was taking on how to set it up, I was documenting those steps for our internal setup. And then being able to, so I have an edit, a coding standards guide now, a setup document, code review process, execution process, setting up Jenkins jobs, that kind of thing. So quite a bit of documentation. Documenting keywords. This is a great format. If you look at it on the screen here, this shows up really well if you're using the libdoc tool to generate keyword documentation. So just an example there. But I document first and often. And that's really helped. So summary, what I've talked about in this talk has led to success. And so I wanted to share. We're now at over 35 contributors, thousands of keywords. You can see here where we started, where we're at now, but over 50,000 tests, multiple different products now are leveraging the tool, hundreds of resource files, thousands of keywords. So let me just finish it up. I think it's important any talk should have actionable items, and so I want to break these out here in summary. Practice, if you're first learning the tool, practice on the application under test. Find a relevant application, right? A relevant case to practice on. Think about expansion from the start. Don't automate in your own bubble, right? Think bigger. And then think bigger again. Document as you go. Can't overstate this. This is so important. Any documentation, commenting your keywords, adding documentation string to your keywords, but also the high level framework itself. Start with a quick win, and then another quick win, and then another quick win. And those little quick wins, those stepping stones, you'll find that you've got something big at the end. Establish common keywords wherever possible. So think common, if you can make something common, do it. Integrate with existing tools as early as you can. Broadcast your success early and often. And you'll end up with a great framework, and name it, give it a name. I think that's important. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, but thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And I hope it's a great conference for all of you.
Hey, Dave, welcome to RoboCon.
Hello, Joe. Good to be here.
Good to see you again. All right, let's jump right into it. We got a lot of questions. First one is, would you say it is also possible to get started with Robot Framework with the docs that they provide? What was the benefit of the Udemy course?
Absolutely. The docs are great. The Udemy course just put a whole organizational framework around how, with a real world example. And I think I got a lot of my organizational strategies from that course, which was kind of key. But yeah, it's certainly the docs are great on Robot Framework, and I've since learned that. But the Udemy course is a great place to start, and Brian Lamb's got that course on multiple platforms. I highly recommend it.
Awesome. So next question is, how do you avoid the redundant code in several keywords?
Yeah, that's a good question. The organizational strategy, I think, is really the best way to avoid that. If you organize things and name them in a way that is common and people will understand, they'll be able to find what they're looking for. I've learned things in this conference that I want to implement, maybe with the RF Hub 2 or the RF Docs or something where people can go and consume the library document or the resource documentation, the keyword documentation, and search that way. But the organizational strategy was really what drives the lack of redundancy. And now we have a peer review process in place as well, so that helps a lot. Our peer reviewers know what's there and help avoid that.
Cool. All right, next question is, nothing in Slido, is organizing files is the building blocks of any framework. Can you please share some of the rookie mistakes which you have observed during your learning?
Gosh, that's a good question. If I could go back a year or two, a year and a half, and remember what rookie mistakes I made. It really, I've built a lot of automation frameworks in my 25-year career. And so I think I would have to go way back. And because I started out this organization right from the get-go. So I don't know, I'd have to think back 20 years maybe.
Fair enough. Next question is, what's the hardest topic to study for you in Robot Framework? Was there a concept that you found, oh, this is different than what I'm used to?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I don't think the robot framework is so straightforward, and that's what I love about it. And that's why I think it brings automation to the masses. There's concepts that are more challenging than others. I know some Python, but I'm not the best at Python. So writing libraries is a little more challenging. But just being able to understand how to create keywords from Python methods took just a minute to understand, but not too bad.
Nice. Next question was, because there's so many keywords, was it hard to find the right keywords? How do you handle that?
We have a lot now, and finding the right one is really, again, the organizational strategy is based on the application. So how pages are organized in the application are how my folder structure is represented for the product. So it might be the common keywords might be a little more difficult to understand if there's application agnostic stuff, and that just comes with experience. But we have a regular meeting, and we highlight things that have been created to help. And it's every 2 weeks that meeting.robot happens, and we highlight different common level keywords that have been created to help people out.
Great. Next question is, what robot libraries do you use most?
Obviously the built-in library, you can't get away from that one, and that's got some great stuff. The Selenium library is a big one right now. Collections, date time, strings, any of those utility libraries, operating system, requests library for some of our API testing. We use a lot. IMAP library, transitioning to the RPA framework library to their email stuff. The RPA framework library is a treasure trove of keywords, and so that's just been awesome. But yeah, that's probably what we use most. I will say that aside from the built-in library, whenever we write a keyword whenever we use a library keyword, I write a wrapper for that. And that way, for example, if I ever wanted to swap out Selenium for the browser library, it would be a much easier lift because there's only one place where we're referencing the Selenium library, and that is in my wrapper resource for the Selenium library keywords.
I love the hack. It's a great layered approach. So you can switch things in and out, and the front-end user has no idea. That's a great. So Dave, we have a ton of questions. You already were in the Q&A answering most of them, so thank you for that. We're out of time, but I'm sure you're going to be in these. I've seen you in the RoboCon venue, so you're going to be the light side or the dark side for people to hit you up with more questions.
Wherever the most people are.
Awesome. Thanks again, Dave. Really appreciate you, and hope to catch up again later. Thank you for joining RoboCon.
All right.
Cheers.
Yep.